What's up guys, hello to Footballtalk here, back after week 7, and I was playing around with a couple of ideas, something Halloween related, like scariest developments around the NFL, along with a few others, but instead I decided to incorporate a few of those into a video where I fittingly discuss the 7 coolest things I saw personally from this past week's slate of games, whether that's individual players, units, or schematic details, and I opted for more of a podcast approach where I simply talk through them instead of actually drawing up all kinds of plays and turn this into another 45-minute project, but rather go through each point and back those up with some all 22 clips in the background so you have the visual features backing those up. And these are in no particular order, by the way, just going through them chronologically. We'll get straight into it here. Let me just quickly ask you that if you enjoy this kind of content, just hit the thumbs up button real quick and maybe also the bell so you're notified whenever I upload anything here. It doesn't cost you anything, helps me out a lot, and I feel pretty good about this being enjoyable for you if you're a football fan who doesn't always want to hear the same old discussions that you see on TV. With that out of the way, here are a few honorable mentions right off the bat. 40-year-old Joe Flacco, after getting traded inside the division to the Bengals, on 40's notice, getting the start on Thursday night against the Steelers, and turning back the clock, just spamming these timing routes on the outside to Jamar Chase, and with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, getting a design carry on his own read. Insanity. The Bears' run game finally kicking into gear against the Saints, 40 carries for 222 yards and 2 touchdowns, with a long of 24, so no breakaway rushes to inflate those numbers, but just a steady drumbeat of DeAndre Swift and rookie Kyle Monangai, averaging about 7.5 yards per carry as a duo, on outside zone specifically. Mike Vrabel getting his revenge on his former team, the Titans, in Tennessee. Solid start when things were on script for Cam Ward and company, but then had that ball just slip out of his hand for a defensive score, right after the Pats put together a long touchdown drive on offense, so 14 points in about as many seconds. Drake May also continuing his incredible season, 21 of 23 on the day. I might have talked about the Seahawks defense here in more detail, and how they absolutely bowled the Texans on Monday night. 19 points isn't really representative of their efforts, as Houston got a strip sack for a touchdown themselves, but as much as I've enjoyed Seattle's aggressive play action attack, they just kinda lost the plot here a little bit on offense, with not running more clock. Still, all the different pressure looks they deep presented, pair of the post-snap rotations, and how they exploited protections was awesome to watch. And finally, I do have to mention the insane ending to the Broncos-Giants game, all 33 Denver points coming in the fourth quarter, but the Giants also scoring a couple of touchdowns themselves, and it came down to that second missed PAT by the emergency kicker with just 37 seconds left. Credit to the Broncos for hanging in there, but my god, I'm not ready to watch on either end. Touchdowns off deflections to a player that wasn't actually targeted for both teams, and a key pass on the game-winning field goal drive, also not landing in the hands of the intended receiver. Truly wild to watch. But now let's get into the 7 things I actually picked out here, with the first one being the Rams' usage of 13 personnel against the Jaguars in London. For context, Sean McVay and the Rams are the ones who truly popularized 11 personnel, meaning 1 running back and tight end each, along with 2 wide receivers being on the field, in the late 2010s and early 2020s. Since he became the head coach in LA in 2017, until including last season, the yearly average of those groupings was basically right at 80%. Only once did they go below 73%, and it was at a record high over 94 just 2 years ago. This past Sunday, the Rams went into these 3 tight ends of 13 personnel sets in 24 of 62 offensive plays. That's 10 more than the total plays they had run out of that grouping from the start of the 2021 season through week 6 this year. We had next gen stats, which was 14 combined, so that's obviously crazy. And their 38.7% rate was also the highest recorded in any game going back to 2016 when next gen started to track these things. And what's crazy is that they threw out of nearly half of those looks, which we have to remember is taking into account how they went up 28-0 on the first drive of the second half, and therefore could run a clock. Kobe Parkinson, Tyler Higbee, and rookie Terrence Ferguson caught 8 of 13 targets for 101 combined yards and a touchdown, although Parkinson's 2 long catches actually came off play action and a screen when he was the only tight end on the field. And overall, 10 different Rams players caught at least 1 pass, most in the McVay era. They actually primarily ran towards a single tight end in those jumbo sets, so weak side zone, as well as strong side when one of those tight ends was detached, along with duo right up the middle. And then Ferguson was actually oftentimes lined up as the de facto X receiver into the boundary, which allowed them to put that 1 wide receiver to the field in motion. A big reason for them throwing so much out of those looks, and big ups to the people running the Rams website, because I stole this directly from them. Entering week 7, the Jaguars had allowed the most net yards per pass attempt in the NFL against multi-tight end sets at 9.7 per. Jacksonville also was without Defensive Player of the Year candidate Devin Lloyd at inside linebacker, So the Rams clearly saw a weakness and tendency that they could exploit, and they went right after it. I absolutely loved that final touchdown to the rookie, where he made it look like a stand-up bootleg for Stafford, but then had Ferguson break back to the post after selling the corner route, isolated with the safety. Awesome stuff. Next up, I just called this the Browns' defensive aggression against the Dolphins. When I first heard the weather reports about Cleveland having steady winds of 25 miles per hour and rainfall, I immediately bet money on the Browns, because they're built to win these ugly games determined by who can run the ball more effectively. And while the numbers weren't vastly different, because the defense was so dominant, this was never a close affair beyond the first quarter. And the difference between what I just described about the Rams using tendency to gain advantages, Browns defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz flat out didn't show Miami's offense any respect with how they approached this game. They were just attacking the line of scrimmage all day long. The Dolphins had 2 long runs by Devon A-Chain that boosted their totals, but otherwise just disrupted the opposing backfield on the regular. Rookie linebacker Carson Schwarzenegger's speed could really shine on a few occasions to chase down runs to the edges, and everyone just swarmed towards the football. In the pass game, they weren't afraid to play a bunch of single high structures and man coverage on early downs especially, and driving on routes, because they didn't expect the opposing O-line to hold up in case they did try any type of double move, and generally wouldn't test them deep, but then changed up their looks and played zone when they got to 3rd and long and late in the game, which is how Miami went 1 of 13 on those, and the deep post safety was even starting to look to jump passes. Myles Garrett didn't even need to have a big game, because the Dolphins tried to get the ball as quickly as they did, although it did get a sack. Newly acquired cornerback Tyson Campbell introduced himself to the dog pound with a pick 6 off the hands of A-Chain, getting hit by the flat defender in cover 3. Obviously just a sloppy game altogether with dropped snaps and playing into the defense's hands, but Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa finished the day 12 of 23 for 100 yards, no touchdowns and 3 interceptions, to where he got benched for the final 2 drives, and his backup Quinn Ewers, the former Texas quarterback they selected in the 7th round, got thrown in and nearly threw a pick on his first try. They also punched the ball out of the hands of kick returner Malik Washington early in the 2nd quarter to help set up a touchdown that allowed them to go up 17-3, which felt like an insurmountable lead throughout the day. That was right after rookie running back Quinshon Judkins broke a long touchdown on a GF power run from I formation, one of the 3 times he reached the end zone on a day, while he otherwise was just grinding out tough yards to keep the clock moving. The third thing here, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid being back on their shit, going up against the Raiders on Sunday. If I had done a Halloween themed video here, it would have been about the Chiefs being the scariest thing for a watered down AFC, considering the ascent they've been on these last 2 weeks, handling the Lions at home on Sunday night, and then absolutely dismantling the Raiders this past Sunday, as they pulled most starters for the duration of the 4th quarter, as they had already set the final score to 31-0. We can certainly talk about how disappointing the Raiders have been overall, and especially the offense feeling as anemic as it does, but let's focus on what Pat and company did on the other side of it. They've really started to get into a groove offensively, starting to hit more of these deep shots, finding these automatic designer plays to convert key downs, but most importantly, just having fun again. This past game was the first time they've ever had Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice at their disposal together, and they went up and down the field, putting together touchdown drives of 92, 84, 94, and 65 yards on the first 4 possessions, plus another easy field goal next, before they checked out, as they gained 30 first downs compared to just 3 for the Raiders, so give a lot of credit to the defense as well. But you just saw Andy Reid dial up a variety of motions, crossing receivers everywhere, then faking them and hitting rail routes off those. Rice being back, running jerk routes underneath. They designed one of those touch pass fly sweeps at the goal line to him. Pat threw him a fade to the back shoulder for another touchdown. They had that sequence where they acted like they were just trying to draw the Raiders offside on the 4th and short, where Mahomes used his acting skills from the State Farm commercials, saying this shit never works, before handing the ball off inside for a first down. But just him scrambling around, no-look passes, throwing balls across his body while going up to the sideline, it just all worked, even once when the defender was kinda sitting in the window and the ball was deflected right to Juju Smith-Schuster for a chunk gain. Even Isaiah Pacheco getting into the end zone for the first time this season, when Vegas actually had 12 defenders on the field, but they weren't set, and he bowled over guys at the goal line. Totally different vibes than a month ago still. Next I've got the Eagles tapping into under-center play action against the Vikings at Minnesota. This one's a shorter point since I discussed this to some degree as part of my most recent article, where I went through 10 statistics that had defined the NFL season leading into this past weekend, talking about how Saquon Barkley's yards before contact average had plummeted from 2.64 last year down to just 1 point flat this season. with a lot of it having to do with the simplicity of the run designs, constantly operating from a shotgun, but also a lack of play-action attack merit to it, which could scare opposing defenses. Well, they may have just listened to me or any of the other people from Philadelphia complaining, as Jalen Hurts went under center for 18 of 49 plays, a 36.7% rate, which was nearly 3 times as high as the typical percentage of just 13.6 coming into the day. And while they couldn't really get the run game cranked up in this one either, with the longest run being wiped off by a holding penalty, as Minnesota threw a lot of bodies at the line of scrimmage, what it allowed the Birds to do is take some shots out of those looks. Hurts hadn't completed a single pass off under center play action through the first 6 weeks. In this game, he went 4 of 4 for 121 yards, including that 79-yard bomb to Devontae Smith, where he toasted former Eagles corner Isaiah Rodgers isolated against him on the post route. They also brought in Frank Johnson as a 6th offensive lineman for 10 total snaps, counting a couple that didn't stand due to penalties, and Hurts had by far his best game of the season, including getting AJ Brown involved for a couple of scores. You just want to see a little more diversity from offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo in how they approach his weekly game plans. Number 5, Micah Parsons' dominance as a pass rusher at Arizona. When the Packers traded 2 first-round picks, along with defensive tackle Kenny Clark to Dallas for Micah on the eve of the NFL season, the idea was this would be to go along with a high-flying offense orchestrated by Matt LaFleur, as DC Jeff Hafley needed that one true ace pass rusher to really take that unit to the next level and close out games. Well, things haven't been as clean as they looked like during the energetic 2-0 start, but number 1 has clearly delivered on his promise. This past Sunday at Arizona, he racked up 3 sacks and 10 total pressures on Jacoby Brissett, and he did it in a myriad of ways, rushing off both sides, winning with power and finesse, early and on secondary efforts, as a stand-up rusher from the second level, as a spin over the center, just a complete showcase, split double teams, and not only create one-on-ones for his teammates, also a few free rushes altogether. He absolutely bullied Cardinals right tackle Jonah Williams on several occasions, whether he tightened the corner for himself with the rip move, attacked his chest with the bull rush if he felt like that guy was setting him too softly, or converting power to speed if Williams tried to kinda jump set out to him, to where the man had been chipped or having the guard slide his way whenever possible. Micah almost single-handedly called multiple drives throughout the day, and this sequence to end the game is what really stands out, which for whatever freaking reason NFL Pro doesn't have the All-22 for, but as Arizona made it down inside the opposing 30, needing a touchdown to take the lead late, with just under a minute left, Micah gets the sack on first down, then Brissett scrambles on seconds, and then on the final 2 snaps, they not only chip, but then also double Micah, which allows one of his teammates to get a hit on the quarterback on those 2 heaves towards the end zone. An utterly dominant performance, where even on the plays he didn't get home, he affected the play in some other way and helped the Packers escape with a victory. One more offensive related one, Shane Steichen's ability to scheme open receivers at the LA Chargers. As I tweeted out on Sunday, the Colts feel like such a well-oiled machine on offense, all of the skill position pieces beautifully slot into their roles. Looking at success rate out of multiple personnel sets, they were almost equally effective with the different looks they presented, and Daniel Jones has executed Steichen's scheme at a higher rate than probably anyone could have ever imagined. What stood out to me again on Sunday were the little details in the passing game. Consistently saw excellent route spacing, how Steichen isolated conflict defenders in high-low or spacing concepts. They frequently created leverage advantages with how they released receivers out of stacks or forced the Bolts to match them off motion. Because of how effectively they've run the ball all season with Jonathan Taylor, they typically are able to chip away with RPOs, which weren't as prevalent in this matchup, but they were able to create easy yardage when moving the quarterback off play action. You saw multiple dump-offs to standout rookie tight ends Tyler Warren of bootlegs, where he'd either peel off the end of the line of scrimmage or they brought him across the formation of the run fake. And then they caught the Chargers in pass defense looks on all 3 of Jonathan Taylor's touchdowns, where they'd have a linebacker mugged up, the D-line in wide alignments, or multiple guys standing up, even dime packages, including the second one on jet sweep of motion from empty, along with a 14-yard carry by Amir Abdullah, who had less than that coming into the game rushing. I may have to do a special video where I highlight this Colts O-line that had lost 2 established starters who signed big contracts with Minnesota this offseason, yet they actually improved collectively, and Quentin Nelson being weaponized as a puller as heavily as he is right now has to be one of my favorite things across the entire NFL to watch. I do have to note here that Justin Herbert had some absolutely insane throws on his part on the other side, and the Chargers would have found a way to come back against most teams around the league, but pretty much every time they scored in the second half, the Colts were able to answer and never got uncomfortable. And last but certainly not least, the Niners not making excuses and coaching the asses off against the Falcons on Sunday night. Because it would have been very easy to sit here after losing the heart and keycock to the defense last week in Fred Warner, after already having placed Nick Bosa on injured reserve, with George Kittle only just coming back from his stint on IR, receivers getting meaningful snaps who weren't even on the practice squads back when the season kicked off, still having backup quarterback Mac Jones at the helm, and say they're just too banged up right now, Atlanta coming off a 20-10 win over the Bills, two teams moving in opposite directions, but hell no. The Jekyll and Hyde nature of the Falcons certainly played into this, we just don't know right now what you're gonna get from them every other week. But those guys in the Bay showed their pride big time and won by the exact same score as I just mentioned. They were the ones who actually established their ability to pound Atlanta's undersized interior of the defense with their ground game, Christian McCaffrey and Brian Robinson Jr. carrying the ball 33 times for 165 yards, to go with the former plowing into the end zone twice. Kyle Shanahan doing an excellent job of creating favorable angles and changing responsibilities for pulling linemen plus the fullback or tight end through motions, as basically exactly half of the running back carries were gap concepts, plus then they attacked the perimeter with a few clever designs on toss plays. While in the pass game, they rarely got all 5 out in the pattern, either having the back on a little bumper motion, or giving someone else a head start into their routes, plenty of under-center true dropback stuff that has continued to be a prominent feature of some of the top offenses around the league, challenging these underneath defenders with the spacing, and of course C-Max deployment as a receiver once again, whether it's a checkdown option, on screens, or that huge 3rd and long to set up the decisive touchdown, where the Falcons apparently only had 10 men on the field, and Mac Jones hits him right up the numbers into the vacated space. Also give him credit for being banged up, hanging in the pocket and delivering throws on time, along with a couple of moments where he avoided negative plays. Meanwhile, the Niners defense was function of pure grit and determination, paired with the excellent game planning and coaching under defensive coordinator Robert Saleh. Considering some of the names that were out there and performing for them, they held Atlanta to just 61 yards rushing on 20 carries and a long of 8 for the night, by setting firm edges against a wide zone heavy approach, funneling the ball back inside where the linebackers stay disciplined in the cutback lanes, their DBs not shying away from sticking their nose in the fan when asked to come and run support, and even taking and pulling linemen. San Francisco blitzed Micah Parsons Jr. and a quarter of his dropbacks, which is pretty high for Saleh standards, and they ran cover 1 on 21 of 65 total snaps, according to Next Gen, where they forced the quarterback to get the ball out early before his receivers could break off their routes, those DBs aggressively driving forward themselves, and a lot of balls hit the ground, only completing about 55% of his passes. The Niners did only get 1 sack on the day, but it was a key one which forced a field goal at the start of the second quarter, as they showed a potential 7-man pressure with 2 marked up backers and the nickel shuffling inside, only to rush 4 and play cover 3 behind it, which clearly flustered panics. So outstanding job all around by them. And this brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this more podcast style video, please leave a like and consider subscribing if this is your first time here. You can go back and read up on my article that I sent out last week with the 10 statistics that defined the early part of the season, even though they're a little bit different now after one more week of games, but still a lot of important info in there. Not 100% sure if I'll have some coming out next week as I'm going on holiday for a couple of days. But once again, check out my betting picks every week, some of the stuff that I just post on social media, all the links for that are down below in the video description. And worst case, the week after that, I'll have my mid-season NFL awards and all-pro teams coming out in an article, so make sure to check back for that and follow along for the ride. So until then, see you later, peace!